Here in Colorado, we have the right to bring things to the initiative if we want. That is, citizens can put some controls on the legislature. The legislature hates that and every few years tries to stop it somehow. To talk about that, Elena Nunez from Colorado Common Cause. Glad to have you here.
Good to be here.
And Dennis Polhill from the famed Independence Institute. Also, you work a bit with the Institute and Referendum group.
Yes, sir. Initiative and Referendum Institute.
There we go. All right, let's, for those people who are unfamiliar, initiatives are what? Why are they a good thing?
It's the citizens' right to petition. They have the power to overrule the legislature when the legislature makes a mistake, or to take action on items that the legislature refuses to act on.
I've always seen it more as a safety valve. Even though I've hated some of the things that the people have passed, we wouldn't have the open records laws, we wouldn't have the sunshine laws, we wouldn't have term limits, we wouldn't have the taxpayer bill of rights. These are things that would never pass because these are limits on the government. They don't want these things. There are other things that I'm not very happy about, tax increases in Amendment 23 and others, but why is it a good thing? Why is it that you and I, who disagree on everything, your Common Cause, I'm in the Independence Institute, why is it we both agree that the initiative process is something that needs to be protected?
Well, because that's exactly it. It allows the people to take action when the legislature won't. So on issues that are too controversial or that cut against the legislature's own power, the people can take that to the ballot and overwhelmingly have been successful doing so. When they want to bring an issue forward, legislature won't touch it, but the people will.
Right. Now, you've both heard this one over and over again. It is too easy to change the Colorado Constitution. Anybody can do it. All right, now I've been there, you've been there, you've been there. Tell me, I think that people who think it's easy to change the Constitution are only people who haven't tried. How effective, how easy is it to change the Constitution?
Well, you need over 100,000 signatures to get on the ballot. So anybody that wants to say that, those are basically the people that are saying that are people who've never gone out on the street and on a sunny day for hours and tried to get signatures. Get 100 signatures and then tell me how hard it is to get 100,000 signatures, and then they have credibility.
How successful have they been in changing the law? I mean, the legislature votes on about a minimum 500 bills a year, and then there's late bills, so there could be, I've known sessions where there have been 700, close to 800 bills that have gone through. How many initiatives usually get to the ballot in comparison?
Well, it's rare that there's a dozen. There's many that are started, but a lot of those are just trying to get the language straight. They're redundant. They're the same issue. They're trying to get a better title. Colorado's the worst state for issuing titles of any state. So not many make the ballot. I think I predicted that we'd maybe see 6 this year. It's too early to really make a decent prediction.
Yeah, but this year there's 140 initiatives filed. That's too many. We can't handle it. We citizens, we're not smart enough to understand this. We're not going to have 140 things on the ballot. We'll probably, as Dennis said, I bet 6, maybe 8.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to remember is it's one thing to qualify a measure, it's another thing for voters to approve it. And just because something makes the ballot doesn't mean that it will pass. And in fact, the previous attempts by the legislature to limit the initiative process have been rejected by voters. So I think we don't give the voters enough credit to weigh proposals and make the right choices.
Let's jump on this one, because it's that time again. It seems like every 2 to 4 years, the legislature, and I understand this, Republicans and Democrats have an incentive to dislike the initiative and referendum process because it can put limits on what they do. None of them like Tabor, because Tabor requires them to either prioritize their spending or ask us to keep the money. They don't want that. They certainly don't want term limits. They certainly don't want these things. So have they ever been successful when they go to the people and keep asking us to make it harder to get things on the ballot?
Generally speaking, no. In 1996, there was a measure that would have made it much harder. That was defeated. Again, in 2008, same thing. The last successful measure was actually one in response to Tabor, where they adopted single subject to limit the issues that could go before voters. And now there are many who are wondering if that was such a good idea.
How do we compare to other states? I mean, is this the same problem in other states, that we've got to get rid of this check and balance?
Yeah, I think it's important that we go to a fundamental point. The United States changed the paradigm when we created the United States, and the people were defined as sovereign. Therefore, when we create a state constitution, the people have to approve it. All right, that means that the people in the Constitution delegate to the legislature the authority to legislate. What you're seeing here is the legislature trying to infringe on that and take back something that doesn't belong to them.
That's really worth repeating, because I think this is important. The Colorado Constitution describes the legislature, I think it's Article 5, I don't know where it is, that the legislatures, of course, what we know, there's House members in Denver, there's senators in Denver, state senators, but it's also the people. And so the people are the legislature, and this is how they counterbalance that.
Indeed.
And we, people, come first. What about the worries? When you hear it on both sides, then you're going to have mob rule. What we have is a republic. We elect these people who know more about the system than we do, and we don't want mob rule. We don't want direct democracy. We want the republic.
Again, that hasn't been the experience. If you look, the voters are quite smart, and they make decisions when the legislature won't. And that, if you look at the history of what's passed and what's failed, that's when you see the initiative process being used. And it's been quite successful, and it's why Colorado has been a leader on a number of issues, because the people have the right to bring issues to the ballot when the legislature won't act. So this whole idea of mob rule just isn't borne out by history.
All right, then let me try this one. There are two different types of laws here. There's the statutes, and these are the laws that say, that the legislature changes, and they have the power to change any time. But then there's a constitution that cannot be changed without a public vote. But in order to change the statutes, which are easier, it takes the same amount of signatures as to change the Constitution. Now, what I'm hearing from lawmakers is that, wait, one is hugely important. This is the Constitution. It shouldn't be changed lightly. One, if the people make a terrible mistake, well, we can always correct it ourselves. That's the statute. Why should they be at the same level? There's always a push to make the constitutional level much higher. That is, you have to get, if it's 100,000 signatures here, then make it 200,000 to change the Constitution.
Well, that wouldn't matter if the legislature was not hostile to citizen participation in government. In other words, when citizens initiate a statute, it's vulnerable to infringement by the legislature. They don't respect the vote of the people, and so they'll often infringe it. So as a result, you have a few statutory things that should be statutory, and initiative proponents would be happy to make them statutory, but they have to go into the Constitution because of the hostility of the legislature.
But let's face it, not everybody knows how important or what an initiative does. I mean, look at, in my case, Amendment 23. It sounded like a great idea, but it caused problems when we didn't have enough money, and it forced us to spend more money. The legislature had their hands tied because you nasty people put something in the Constitution that really belonged in the statute.
I agree. It would have been better in statute.
Well, therefore, we should have a higher level to get there, right?
Well, no, that doesn't. That just means you need more signatures. That just raises the bar. That doesn't stop it from going into Constitution or statute.
Would you support raising the bar? That is, having a higher threshold of signatures to get things change the Constitution?
I would support a differential. But the legislature could do that unilaterally by lowering the signature requirement on statutes.
So in other words, right now, if they want to make that difference,
that's right,
without asking us, they could say, all right, to get a referred measure to change the rules, the statutes, you only need 50,000.
And there you go. You have evidence, empirical evidence, basically. It discloses their agenda. They don't like the petition process. They don't want citizens telling them anything.
It also misses the point. I mean, the reason that we have signature requirements are to show that there's a threshold of support. But as long as the legislature can change what the voters have put in place, you're never going to go that route. I mean, just look at Common Cause's experience with campaign finance. We passed a statutory measure and the legislature gutted it. So when we came back,
Thank God they gutted it. It was a piece of crap.
It was a good law, and the voters
law.
passed it again, and it's in the Constitution. And now it is hands off for the legislature. So if they really want people to stay out of the Constitution, you have to incentivize the statutory process. And that's not about signatures, because that's just a matter of cost. It's about requiring some kind of cooling off period where for some number of years, 10 years, 7 years, you can't touch what the voters have put in place without a supermajority vote.
There's also another check and balance here. If the legislature hates campaign finance reform, and they should, they can always refer it back to the people. That is, they have the power. When we want to get something on the ballot, we got to go to all of our friends and say, can you sign this? Can you sign this? Can you sign this? Can you sign this? The 100 people in Denver, not even the governor. The governor can't weigh in on it. They can just say, let's put something on the ballot, and it goes on the ballot. How many people do they need to get something on the ballot?
It's 2/3 of the legislature.
All right. So if 2/3 of the legislature want to change campaign finance reform or Amendment 23, they can get it on without paying. It doesn't
Right.
cost them personally a dime.
Right.
All right. What's the threat this year?
So this year, there's another attempt to make the initiative process more difficult, although really it's just about making it more expensive. So constitutional measures would need twice as many signatures as they currently do. So instead of 80-something thousand valid, it would be 160,000 valid signatures.
And you need to get a whole lot more.
And you have to get a whole lot more to make sure that you have enough. And then the other piece is it requires that you collect a certain number of signatures from each part of the state, which sounds really good, right? We should all weigh in. But in practice, what it means is that it's far more expensive because instead of running one signature drive, you have to make sure you have enough signatures in every single congressional district. So what does that mean? If you want to put something in the Constitution, it's going to cost you 2 or 3 times what it would have cost you before, making the initiative process a tool of only those who can afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get on the ballot.
Personally, a couple years back, the state passed a law that made it much more expensive to get things on the ballot. I tried to get something on the ballot in 2010 to counter Obamacare. And the law said I couldn't hire people to carry these signatures, the petitions, the way I wanted to, that they had to be paid in a different way, which was much more expensive. Well, that doesn't bother rich guys. It was Jared Polis who gave money on campaign finance reform. He gave money on 23. He's giving money to the anti-fracking initiatives this year. Whether it doubles the cost from $500,000 to $1 million to get something on the ballot for him, he doesn't care. But for somebody like me, that would take it out completely. There's no way I could afford that. This law that's being proposed is so that rich guys can play in the initiatives and working people can't. Am I wrong on this?
Indeed, absolutely. They've already disenfranchised activists, and I want us to take one more step in that direction.
When you say disincentivize activists by?
Well, I mean, activists, citizens have more difficulty exercising the process now because they've made it so difficult.
And it is difficult. All right, less than a minute here. What is it you want people to know?
So there's another threat at the legislature. It's HCR 1002, and people need to let their legislators know that this is a bad law and they need to vote against it.
Who's sponsoring it?
Representative Court and Representative Quorum in the House, and Senator Crowder and Senator Schwartz in the Senate.
And while this is not an RD issue, it's good to know that all these guys are up for re-election as well, and if they vote to take away your rights, you get a chance to vote on them.
That's right. If the Republicans had a brain, they would all pull their sponsorship and use it as a way to get Republicans elected in the next session. So there you have it.
Yeah, your first part of your proposition there is the problem.
Yes.
Dennis, thank you. Elena, thank you. And thank you. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Tell a friend about the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. And we'll see you next week.